that if God is maximally glorified, cannot receive more glory, that's not the same as having maximal glory. That's what I criticize him on.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is you're even criticizing his position from a poor vantage point, because that would be like me criticizing your view on atheism by telling you what I believe atheism is and what
I'm not an atheist.
Represents.
James, what do you do?
Exactly. The criticism is from an external critique, not an.
Did you understand what I said, James?
I thought that I gathered what you said. That's why I gave you the other criticism.
James, well, that was lost on me. Do you think that if God cannot be more glorified, that's like saying he has maximal glory?
No, what I think you're doing in the conversation is how you're explaining to me how you're critiquing him. And I'm not saying that some of your criticism of him is not valid, but what you're doing is you're saying, okay, I am going to take this modern view of the English language 2,000 years later, and I'm going to impose that this has to be what they meant by these words. But the problem is that those words were originally written in Greek.
This isn't even in Scripture.
They were translated. And so what you're doing is you're doing an external critique.
We're not talking about Scripture.
Yeah.
I'm saying you're doing an external critique of his view. You're not doing an internal critique. An internal critique is what you should be doing. But if you want to do an external critique...
Internal critique of what?
They don't want to do an internal critique, James, because they want... know
James, do you know what you're doing right now? You're adding confusion to what's happening. John's able to speak for himself perfectly well, right? So what you're doing is...
No, he's not.
Well, you're being a proxy of a sort, James is. James, he's
not even addressing the issue.
Yeah, James, you're not required to speak for John.
I'm using John Lee, and the example of what just happened is a reason that JJ could not criticize John Lee for being an idiot. He just has to say John Lee has a valid interpretation. He now has to say that.
I don't have to say that.
On everything. Well, then you're in contradiction because you've conceded everything else, and I've told you that I believe that there are invalid interpretations and valid interpretations.
I don't believe that, though. He has. No, I don't. Again, interpretations are just that. Interpretations. I don't have to say he has a valid interpretation or an invalid interpretation.
Yeah.
It's plain to see he has an interpretation.
So
how do you know if it's valid or not, JJ?
Yeah, that's a great question, John.
I don't know what valid or invalid interpretation means here. That's why I don't use it.
Yeah, if I may, JJ, because actually I think I understand what JJ's saying, and I'm not trying, I'm just honestly being as honest as I can be. I think it doesn't matter about the Scripture because he's not necessarily, John just says, so John just makes the statement that God gets glory from creating man. Then John's saying that, or JJ's saying, how can that be? Because if God's has maximal glory, that's a contradiction if he's getting more glory. It doesn't make sense. That doesn't have anything to do with the interpretation of the Scripture. If I understand you, JJ, because I actually am trying to follow what's happening here, and I think is that.
But John Lee doesn't want to. Yes, but John Lee doesn't want to say maximal glory, but he will concede that God cannot receive more glory.
Yeah,
and if you cannot receive more glory, that means you're at the maximum. That's what maximum glory is.
I didn't make that.
That's just how words work. That's just how words work, John. You're just a disingenuous fuck.
The problem is you both have an interpretation. You've said you'll never declare what an invalid or a valid interpretation or how you would decide that, which means that for all intents and purposes, John Lee's interpretation is equal to your own, which means you can't critique John as being a dumbass unless you apply it to yourself, and I don't think you want to do that.
I don't see how that follows.
So
And I'm not sure I want you to try to explain it.
If you say that what John Lee is doing is idiotic, but yet you have put the level of interpretation to where everything has an equal playing field, you've just made that statement vacuous. It's just opinions.
Everything
John Lee's
has.
opinion is the same as yours. But if you take his opinion,
No, I've never said that.
Hey, James?
I've never said that all opinions are equal.
and that's why we asked you, how would you decide what is a valid interpretation?
What do you mean by valid and invalid?
So, an invalid versus valid, I think those words are self-explanations.
Yeah.
As applied to interpretations or opinions.
In other words,
Invalid.
there's a certain semantic range, okay? And so things outside the semantic range is not valid.
What the fuck? What the fuck? What is that?
So when you are having a view, it's just like when you form a logical syllogism in philosophy. Basically, what you're trying to say is that it's sound, but you're not making it valid. So anybody can make something sound, philosophical statement, but it be ridiculous, but you have to have that second component. If you want to actually like push it.
That's actually untrue, what you've just said. But James, instead of defending John's point of view...
No. We need to stick to this for just a moment.
Sure.
You do know that there's a difference between valid and sound, right?
Right.
Yeah. What does that have to do with his opinion? Or interpretation, sorry.
And what is the distinction between valid and sound, James?
So if you are comparing the two, the one has true premises, the other one does not.
Right.
And so if JJ is building his view based on crap premises that aren't substantiated, then that means that his is not going to work. But if I have something...
Not going to work, what do you mean?
You can
Go ahead,
verify.
explain that.
I'm trying to also make it very layman for the audience.
All right, so the premises are not true, right? So what you're saying?
Yes,
and that doesn't...
If I have an example where all of Christendom has never believed or conveyed that God could make a squared circle, or that God can do illogical possible things, and that hasn't been the primary Christian view, then I've got data that I'm building up within my argument. JJ's is, I read this, I feel like it could be this, and that's it. But in these discussions, I don't really, like, what you feel doesn't matter. It's what reality and what you can build.
Okay, what is the difference between validity and soundness?
I thought I explained it pretty.
You gotta be kidding me, Daniel.
What is the difference in validity and
soundness? That's a stupid question, dude. This is not Trivial Pursuit.
You can go ahead.
Clickety.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what you didn't get from my examples.
Yeah. Well,
I made them pretty basic.
Well, you said didn't work.
So, if you want me to make it more technical, the argument is only valid if the conclusion follows from its premises. Is that sufficient for you?
Yes, and now what is soundness? That's correct.
Are we doing this pop-up quiz?
Oh, it's so stupid. And he wants you to follow through on it, on top of that.
You have yet to describe soundness. What is soundness?
So, when you make it sound, all the premises are true. But in JJ's case, his premise
that's not what soundness is.
That's exactly what that means.
Okay, that's not what soundness is.
It's exactly what it means.
So soundness
the implication is valid and the premises are true.
I just want to make sure that he's doubling down on this.
It's James. Now you made some claims. I have no interest in discussing validity or soundness. You brought it up.
You said that what I said was wrong, but what I said is right.
What does it mean for an argument to be sound?
Daniel, I just explained this to you.
He just
You-
You're
told
the one who
you.
said that I was wrong.
James,
I-
James, you
dude.
explained validity. You explained validity well. You explained it. But I was asking you, what does it mean for an argument to be sound?
And he gave that to you.
I mean, I stated that,
And
Daniel.
you said he was
I didn't hear
wrong,
him.
which is stupid.
And what would that?
I only heard him say what. I only heard him say what valid was. I think.
Right. What is soundness, James?
Well, maybe he did say sound. No, he did say sound. That's right.
Yeah, I literally said that the only way to make that valid argument sound is if all the premises are true. And
Correct.
that's what I'm arguing. JJ's premises are not true, but I have actual premises.
Well, that's,
No, I
that's,
just
that's
found out
really
your
good.
questions are stupid, Daniel. Why are you even asking?
Well,
Fair enough.
that's
No,
not
right.
that's not right either, though.
No,
Well, he
he
did
was
say that
correct.
that's not
You
argument.
guys are arguing against this basic definition.
What is the
I mean, I don't even
purpose of
care
the
that it's
question,
wrong.
Daniel, other than stupidity?
Well, his purpose was because he said that we're talking about validity. He said that opinions or an interpretation can be valid or invalid, and he said they can be valid and invalid in the same way as a logical argument, like a syllogism.
Right.
But I think it's a different way. of it.
Are you
Right.
equivocating on the word valid, James? Is that what they're arguing? Is that what they're saying?
Yeah,
I don't think it's the same.
doing that, but so I tried to use him as I tried to have the conversation, John, on a colloquial level to show him that he's wrong. Then I had to explain it to him on a philosophical level to show him he's wrong. There's nothing else I can do at this point to convince JJ. He's just going to believe his interpretation and shake hands and part ways. There's
Welcome
nothing
to
else
my
I can do.
experience for the past several months. It's
You didn't even do
not
that, though.
they're trying to convince you of an opinion that you hold. They want to debate your opinion sometimes. It's just so ridiculous, man. So there's one thing.
Yeah,
that
how is an
bothers me about
opinion?
What my opinion
How is an
is.
opinion? I'm sorry. How is an interpretation valid or invalid? Because it's either true or not true?
Yeah, I mean, I have an answer for that. But
Is that what you're trying to get at, James? Is an interpretation valid if it's true and invalid if it's not true?
I mean, I actually gave you a proper answer. So a couple of people were laughing for some reason. But
I don't think you did.
If we're treating what you're saying and we put it in like a form of a syllogism and we build that up, I don't believe that your premises are true because your premises are starting with your feels. And feelings do not matter when it comes to the validity of that argument.
James.
What fields are you talking about?
James,
You would need to make it sound, you need to have the true premises. I can
James, are
actually
you
go back and show you that throughout Christian history, no one has ever believed in any substantial scale that God can do logical
show that.
contradictions or that
Yeah.
verse means
You can't show that.
Yeah, James, that's insane. What you just said was.
you're basically.
Hold on a
Look,
second. May I speak? Yeah, what you
I
what
question
you
that
just
you
said
can show that, James.
is I couldn't differentiate from what you said from sanity and insanity, right? Now you've gone and said that omnipotence, right? That no one in the history of Christianity has ever taken omnipotence to mean that God can do logically impossible things, which is just fucking stupid.
So,
Now you said something. Now let me finish, please.
Daniel, no. You cut
All right,
me
James,
off.
let me
Now you're
fucking finish,
misrepresenting what
man.
I'm saying. No, you cut me off. You misrepresented what I said, Daniel,
Okay.
which means you don't get to continue misrepresenting me. You're just going to mute your mic, and I'm going to finish my thought. Then you can come in. So he's taking this verse, and he's applying it, and he's adding to
Do you know
the
which verse it
verse.
is?
He's adding. Yeah, I can probably pull it up for you in a second. You are adding that it says God can do all things, including logically impossible things. So you are adding that to that verse. When the person wrote that verse, he's not thinking logically impossible because that's never been a Christian view. He's thinking all logical possibilities.
Right, you're begging the question, right? Now you're going to make the claim that omnipotence, all powerful, has never been taken to mean that God can do logically impossible things.
In the context of the verses discussed earlier.
In the context of the verse, there's nothing that says anything about logical impossibility.
That's correct.
It just says all things. All things includes logically impossible.
No, that's what JJ.
Now, all things.
That's what
that's
JJ
all
is
things-
saying.
All
That's the
things
assumption.
include. Well, what
That's
does
the
all
assumption.
things mean? Now, what does all
That
things mean?
is
We're gonna
the
have to consider.
assumption
James,
and the premise. Look, that is the assumption and the premise that JJ is trying to put in, but he doesn't have any grounding for that. He's
Right.
literally saying, "I feel this way," and I feel this
Grounding?
way doesn't do anything to the conversation.
yeah, I permitted you to
Grounding.
overspeak me, James, 3 or 4 times, only because I think your words are more damning than anything that I could say. Now you've
Fair
made the
enough.
accusation. Now you've made the claim that no one in the history of Christianity has taken omnipotence or that passage to mean that God can do logically impossible things. That's just insanity. It's wrong. You're
Do you have a
incorrect.
source?
He
Now-
just means
Do you have a source?
nobody
Yeah.
worth
Now, when
listening
God
to.
says, now when all things means all things, right? All things
have a
would
source?
include logically. All things would include logically impossible
Commentary,
things,
anything
right?
church father, anything.
So now,
Or-
now, James, what you can do is you can do one of two things. You can either be a gentleman, you could be honest about it and say, you know what, maybe I didn't think about this, or you can just continue lying. But just know that everyone will recognize that. So the claim you've made
Put
is
words in my mouth, and now you're calling me a liar. So our
Well,
conversation is over. I
that's
don't
fine.
have a good night,
people-
James.
on that level.
He can-
man.
Have a
He
good
can
night.
he can say that. I mean, I really don't think he can show that nobody in the history of Christianity has ever thought that. But I mean,
But Jay,
the alternative,
what I
again, I'm just gonna return, I'm just gonna,
person.
well, you did say that.
JJ, I did
I'm
not
just gonna-
say it's
I'm just gonna reiterate, I'm just gonna reiterate what the alternative is, though.
I
The
did not-
alternative interpretation is that, what it means is that, what it's really saying is that all things that are possible with God.
JJ, you're not following along. I never said there's never been anyone absolutely in the history of Christendom
Oh, I'm sorry, what did you say?
who's ever.
Then what did you really say? Yeah, I'm sorry, the mistake. What did you really say?
Kept repeating it, saying that I said that because
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's a mistake. What did you really say?
I
Sorry.
said within the conversation, I said the majority and the consensus and the people who look at this, it has never been taken that way. What is majority? Majority.
No, you're talking about history. You said
Majority implies a minority, right? Which isn't all.
that's not what you said either, though.
So
That's not what he was referring to. You made the claim that you could look back in history and not find somebody who had took it that way.
within that first 100 years, I'm very confident that you could
That you couldn't find it?
not
Yeah,
find
I'm
a record of that.
I'm pretty confident you couldn't find
all of Christendom
your ass
has been
with a mirror.
who's taken that verse how you are now. Sure, there's lots of idiots. People can make bad views. I'm conceding that. I'm
Right.
just saying
I
that
conceded as well.
Daniel was misrepresenting me, and that's why mine and his conversation is done.
That's fine.
Actually, JJ,
Right, so if you're just saying that you can look and you won't find somebody that you would want to take seriously that had that deal.
Have you found anyone, JJ?
Changed his point of view.
Even one person?
JJ,
I think it's irrelevant.
JJ,
Two
you need
mirrors.
two mirrors to find your
I
ass.
I don't think you'd find that then either. I mean, maybe you would, but I'm open to being wrong.
There's a reason why.
And
I
I
have
do
a
think that
confidence level that he could not
yeah,
find that.
there's a
I believe
reason
that
why.
I believe that there were scholastics who argued this point. I do believe.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure too, but I think I think it's irrelevant.
this is why modern apologists make the distinction between maximally powerful and omnipotent. Right? So there's a distinction to be made. Many people will say maximally, and they'll make sure that the distinction is clear. The reason they make the distinction clear is because it's been a problem, something that they have to make sure to let people know about, right?
And I agree.
That's the point.
I agree with them that it's a problem. I think it's actually a reasonable fix, a reasonable kind of Band-Aid to refer to maximal greatness. That's why I don't claim, omni-great dick energy anymore. I think
See,
it's
JJ, the problem
problematic.
is that there are real challenges that you can level against Christianity that you can actually like Google and find examples
Exactly,
of
James.
Christian thinkers going for them. But for you to like, I'm JJ, 2,000 years later,
They're
I'm going to
squabbling
pull
over
this out of your
nonsense.
butt and I'm going to charge it. It's just not. It's not going to fly.
And
What do
now
you mean
he's
it's not
just
gonna
lying.
fly?
He's just lying.
What do you mean it's not going to fly?
It's going to fly as in I'm not taking your objection seriously. You haven't
What
demonstrated
objection?
that shit. With you saying that that verse means that God can do logically impossible things based on your reading of it, you haven't done anything that's made me want to consider that or even take it seriously. As a matter of fact, the reason why I'm going back and forth and I stopped my dinner is because this is such a slam dunk for Christianity that it was just really easy to come in and do.
Yeah, but you
Slam
understand
dunk
that-
how?
yeah, but you understand
by
that
slam
John-
dunk, we're saying that your interpretation, that what it really means, what it's really saying is that all possible things are possible with God.
See,
And who the fuck cares?
when you have 10 atheists, James, believing
And James
otherwise,
also, you have to
it's
remember
obviously a slam dunk. Is there
that John holds the view
We're still
that
done.
John holds the
You
view
talk
that
to someone
God
else, Daniel.
God can do logically impossible things, and this is God. John says that God transcends logic, given that the Trinity defies. The Trinity is true. The Trinity defies the law of identity. Therefore, God, as the
and now
Trinity,
you're misrepresenting me by that statement. God
defies the laws
transcends the laws
of
of
logic.
logic.
So you're actually arguing against the very person
100%
that you
false.
seem to be white knighting.
Like I said,
100%
Daniel,
false.
I'm not talking to you anymore in this conversation. So
James,
address other
no one's
people because I'm not
James,
responding to you.
James, no one's compared about your whining. No one's concerned about your whining, right? That's
Yes,
enough
Daniel.
whining.
Don't call Daniel James. That's you. You're James.
The statement God transcends the laws of logic does not mean God can do all logically possible things. That's ridiculous, Daniel.
What does it
That's
mean
not
then?
at all. That's a misrepresentation, Daniel.
What does it mean then?
What does it mean?
Yeah, God transcending the laws of logic means above, meaning that God is not subject to the laws of logic, but that the laws of logic are subject to God. That's what it means.
Well, that's an interesting use of transcends, but okay.
Yeah, so you would say that God, the Trinity breaks the classical law of identity, correct?
False.
Okay, so you've changed your view at this point. What is it? A
No,
relative
there's been
identity?
no change.
Well,
Once again, you guys make it some fabrication. I'm the one that has a point. Then when my point that I've been maintaining contradicts your fabrication, you guys either say 1, I'm lying, 2, I'm contradicting myself, 3, I changed my position. All 3 of those positions are false.
right. Listen, there would be no need for anyone to fabricate anything about your view. Your view is facile enough that it can be picked apart quite easily by anyone with an IQ above, 12.
Yeah, by lying.
Right.
Sure.
I would actually hope that I would need to do something like fabricate points of view.
And that's why we hit this particular point.
James, we hit this particular point is because you're complaining, you're crying, because you made a statement that you couldn't back up, which was that no one in the history of Christianity has taken omnipotence to mean that God cannot God cannot break the laws of logic, or God cannot contradict himself.
And
you've yet to give an example.
I might agree with them
Now, the
on that.
passage says all things, and if you think that all things does not include logically impossible things, then you're just lying.
I would probably venture
what's-
to agree with James
Well-
with regard to those passages.
What's the hermeneutic that says that interprets that as all things that are possible with God?
So, JJ, there's what's known as interpretation methods. This is when we're talking about hermeneutics.
That's what hermeneutic says.
No one is saying that there's like, I'm not even sure if I want to get into this because this was just, your arguments are just not on point tonight, JJ. And I thought like earlier today when we were talking, you were making some really good things, but tonight.
What's the hermeneutic though? Yeah, what's the hermeneutic?
Well,
Argument
it's like
was pretty good,
arguing
though.
with the flat earther, man.
Yeah, what's the
Like a waste of
hermeneutic
time.
that leads you to it reading all things that are possible with God?
Right.
Yeah, no one is ever taking that as to all things are possible with God, even logical impossibilities.
Okay, support that.
What's the hermeneutic?
No one is assuming that God can make a squared circle. No,
I'm not
no
asking
one
that. I'm asking what the
in
hermeneutic is.
Christendom has ever. I'm telling you that when you're looking at things, we have a philosophical view on language. We have how
Yeah,
did
I know. What's the hermeneutic on this, though?
I even told you the context of the story, of the verses. I mean, I already told
Which
you that
verse?
half an hour ago.
What verse?
It's talking about the young rich ruler. It's talking about the camel.
Where is that?
With an eye of a needle.
Where's
That's
that?
what it's talking about. I
Where
already
is that?
explained it earlier.
No, you didn't. You just said that. What you just said now. What? That's all you said earlier. What verse are you talking about?
I don't know. I could look it up, but I'm just going by.
You'd have to look it up. Right.
I'm going by recollection. And then
Correct.
Do you think it's only?
that's
Do you
what
think it's only in one
the
place?
context.
Do you think that it's only stated one place?
It's talking about the camel going through an eye of a
Do you
needle.
think it's only stated one place?
No, it's not only stated one place, but it's still the same context
What context?
of the Gospels, of the young rich ruler, and of the camel going through an eye of a needle.
I don't think that's true.
That's what it's talking about with God. All things are possible.
I don't think that's true.
I mean, JJ, are you taking
Yeah,
that
James,
verse?
don't chime in, or I'm going to chime in.
JJ,
So
are
let
you
it be
taking
with,
that
let it be
verse
between
to mean-
JJ and James. Let it be between JJ and
are
John.
you taking that
Or I'm going
verse
to chime
mean
in.
it's an actual needle?
James,
Do you think it's an
James,
actual needle?
James. If you chime in, I'm going to chime in. James, if you're going to chime in.
JJ, the question is he interpreting it that way?
James, if you're going to chime in.
It's always been interpreted.
James, if you're going to chime in, I'm going to chime in. Let JJ and John speak, please.
Daniel, I'm involved in the conversation.
James,
Get out of the conversation
you're
for a
not
few minutes.
you're not needed to be John's proxy. Let him
Daniel,
continue, or I'm going to chime
I'm
in.
talking with JJ.
James, stop.
Daniel,
Please.
you continue to mess up the conversation and kill the stage.
Right. James, let John and JJ have a discussion, please. The reason I chimed in was because you were tag teaming JJ. All right, just let them have a conversation. Trust me, you add nothing to it. You had nothing.
Something about my view. And
you have nothing to add to the conversation but unsubstantiated claims.
I'm having a conversation that I'm continuing with JJ and John's here. See, this is your hypocrisy, Daniel. You want to have
you're
like
a bore. Please, just shut up.
John
let James speak.
But
let James,
you don't want to let another theist talk with John while we're talking with JJ.
Okay, so when you were tag teaming JJ and I chimed in, that was unfair, right? Just keep your mouth shut and let JJ and John have a conversation. You had nothing to the conversation.
You are a hypocrite.
John, James, shut the fuck up and let JJ and John speak.
I'm definitely not going to, Daniel.
Yeah, and you haven't substantiated your claim, in which was an outlandish claim, which was an insane claim.
At this point, if the mods want 2 atheists on 1 Christian, and want to pound 1 on 3, 1 on 5, they can just kick me from the stage. But you're not going to interrupt me from having part of the conversation.
All right. So what I'm going to say to you again, James, is that you made a claim. It was left unsubstantiated. You made the claim that nowhere in Christianity has omnipotence ever been interpreted to include logically impossible things. Okay, James.
Daniel.
All things include logically impossible things.
Go back and watch this later.
Right. So now you can let John.
Misrepresenting me.
Now you can let John and JJ.
No, I'm going to keep joining in the conversation. Like I said, if the mods don't want it, they'll kick me from the stage, and we'll just move on. But as far as just
in any case, JJ, the 2 places that it comes up in, I just had to look it up. Matthew 19 and Mark 10, and so that's where the 2 times it comes up. Same story though. That's the main point.
Yes, Owen?
Well, if we take that,
I'm not doing anything on my laptop. We're
if we
Yeah,
just,
James, if you
if
keep
we-
piping up, I'm gonna pipe up, please.
if we accept that, what is that supposed to point out, John?
The context of this verse is, like I said, it's the same story. It's about the young rich ruler, right? And it's talking about the camel going through the eye of a needle, right? And it's not talking about a camel and like some sewing needle. James seems to be familiar with it. I certainly am. It's about a hole in the wall, and people used to have their possessions on the camel, right? And then in order to go through to the city wall, you had to unload your possessions and then have the camel crawl through
Well, this is-
what's called a needle, right? And that's what God's saying that
There's,
was God's
there's no evidence. There's no evidence of that either. That's not
Unbelievable.
biblical either.
Hey, John, you might as well just like be done with that part because he's not going to engage. He's just
Do you
going to
think that's? Do you agree with that? That interpretation, James?
You've never heard this, JJ, or never looked into it enough to know that what John is describing is what that verse means and where it's coming from.
Of course I have. That's
It's not an actual needle.
no. I think that's what the story is talking about. Is this is beside the point. Completely beside the point. That it is talking about an actual needle and an actual camel. Metaphorically, of course.
No, it's talking about a needle in the wall.
Why do you think that's true?
What do you mean? Why do I think that's true?
I mean, why do you think that's what it's talking about? Why do you think that story is true, that it's talking about a needle in the wall? It's not in the Bible.
Well, actually, it is in the Bible. The reason I think it's true is because
No, it doesn't refer to the needle being a hole in the wall, or a
I
gate,
understand.
or whatever you want to talk.
I understand. No, I understand
All
it's
right.
not in the Bible, but
So this is another interpretation.
no. All you have to do is look at it contemporaneously to the times, and there was in the wall what's called the needle. This is common knowledge, right? And so,
No, it's not common knowledge.
Well, actually, it is, JJ. It is. Just look up the
I-
history.
I have.
And so,
I have. In fact, I did. I even. John, I looked this up recently. I went over this
Oh, you
recently.
did? Okay.
Yeah, and there's no evidence of a gate or hole in the wall of Jerusalem called the Needle's Eye or anything like that.
Yeah, that would be incorrect.
Oh, can you cite me something?
Yeah, I will right now. So you have an issue with the two passages in Mark and Matthew. Now you're questioning the historicity of the needle in the wall. Is this where we're at here?
Oh yeah. It's not that popular of a belief. So that comes from, I think, the 18th century, maybe, that story? Not even the 19th century, I think. A visitor to Jerusalem who saw this place and then thought, oh, this must be what it's talking about. No. However, there is, I forget the source, I could look this up for you, an older parable which talks about an elephant going through the eye of a needle in the same type of story with respect to what's possible and impossible.
Yeah, it's basically just a metaphor, just using a narrow.
I agree. I agree. It's a metaphor, but it's not referring to some actual place. Something to do with how people had to pass through this crack in the wall and take their worldly possessions off their camel. That's some folklore, more modern folklore.
Yeah, Jesus is not making an example saying that this story is literal, but because they do have the narrow spots, they do have certain things which are described getting a camel through. John's example is one that's been mentioned in history. These are just facts.
In history, where? Mentioned in history, where?
So as I'm reading, I just looked it up, JJ, and it seems to me that there is a recognition of the eye of a needle. With it's in the Quran, it's in other passages prior to the Bible. So this is a concept that being that they were nomads and traveling on camels and stuff, they had certain. It may not have been the Wall of Jerusalem, but people back during that time seems to have understood exactly what they're talking about.
Just a metaphor about what's possible and not possible.
What are you saying,
Right.
JJ? What do you think that it means?
Just what it says. It's a metaphor about what's possible and not possible.
So you're basically
And
saying
it's talking about it's more possible for a camel pass through the eye of a needle, something very large passing through something very small, than it is for a rich man to enter heaven. But all things are possible with God. If that's just saying that all things that are possible, I don't understand what it's trying to say. Somebody might call it vacuous.
So you have to take that in conjunction with other verses where it says, what is impossible for man is impossible with God. It doesn't mean the logical impossibilities. It means, like, I can't create the earth, for example. I can't form a human in the womb. I'm limited to drive within God's mechanisms. That's why you can't isolate a verse.
You can interpret it however you want. If it's just saying that all things that are possible for God are possible for God, who cares?
That's not even what it's saying.
Yeah, maybe more like all things that are possible. Things that would be impossible for man would be possible for God, and other things as well, but not to include logical contradictions. I mean, that's just kind of what I'm thinking there.
Why would it include logical contradictions?
Well, I think the question, can God destroy himself? I think that's kind of a good thing to think about.
There's another problem here, though, is that then you come up with God is beholden to logic, I guess.
Yeah, I think that would probably be another nature thing. Kind of like the morality stems from his nature. Logic, he's just logical, so it stems from his nature.
So God is logic?
Well, I mean, just by him existing, I mean, that's kind of, wouldn't that kind of be the manifestation of kind of the classic laws of logic? It just seems like it just would be the case. Yeah, I don't know about beholden to it. I don't know. I don't think about that. Not operating
So it says
outside.
nothing is impossible with God. In other places where it says nothing is impossible for he who believes. What's that mean?
Yeah. Well, so, and probably what James is saying, I mean, one of the things would be getting back to what the author originally intended. You know, like if we think that the author meant literally nothing is impossible for a believer, so a believer could just want to be God, and so therefore he can be God because he believes, that seems like something that wouldn't have been in the purview of the people writing at that time. I don't know. Does that sound fair, JJ? You see what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't seem like they would be writing that, so it'd be hard for us to, like, if we just took that at face value and just say, well, nothing's impossible. I mean, we can't possibly think that that's what they meant, right? At least not nothing.
Yeah, I mean, how do we know what they meant?
Well, and I think this kind of would go back to, like, how do we know what each other mean, you know, when we're talking to each other or anyone, or a statement that we read from somebody. You know, we have to kind of, you know, look at the words or the usages of them, the context, you know, maybe learn a little bit about the person that wrote it or whatever. You know, there could be various different methods. But I mean, I think it would be kind of the same with any kind of conversation or book or anything you're reading. So, you know, I get what you're saying on face value for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it just says it.
All right,
It just says
JJ,
bad things.
I put, there's actual photos of the gate itself, of the needle of the door, very extensive. I put it in chat, and you might want to take a look at it. Actual modern day photos.
Modern day photos.
Modern day photos.
What is that supposed to show, John?
I just gave you the link. You could take a look and you could criticize it if you
I've
want.
seen all this. I've seen. What does
Okay,
that have to do with anything?
Well, then there you go.
There's no provenance that's what it's talking about.
That's what, to me, that's exactly what.
To you, you can have whatever opinion you want to. There's no provenance.
The other sources that I've seen seem to be some sort of skeptics websites. Oh, there's no evidence, and this is what maybe you
I don't care, John.
Get this from infidels.org or something, JJ.
I'm letting you know that there's no provenance for that being the case.
That particular source that I cited is very expensive.
Look at the source. What a fucking idiot.
I'm not clicking on this.
Best travel deal tips. That's the website.
Yeah, and there's
a world of ways to see the world, and that's the fucking source he used.
Take a look at it. Actual photos. That's why they still exist. Take a look.
Oh God, that's a howler.
From that source, it's talking about the Second Temple. Of course it's destroyed in 70 AD.
Yeah, I'm sure that was vigorously vetted. Jerusalem, the Eye of the Needle Gate.
No.
Journey to Israel, where the Bible comes along.
Well, in other words, the sources I've been looking.
Best travel deal tips.com.
No. Here's the point: that what with the source that I read.
No, I don't give a shit. Daniel, you actually want a good source, a scholarly source here?
Yeah,
look what I just found. Look what I just found. You don't have to read anything or look at any pictures. That's a fucking video by a biblical scholar for you.
And all the contention is, JJ, that there's no evidence of what a gate in Jerusalem. That's what it's talking about. But the gate of the Eye of the Needle, it's widespread in Arabic culture during that time, and so people did understand what the Eye of the Needle and camel represented. JJ, that's the point. And they still exist today.
When?
The only contention is that we don't have evidence of being it on the wall of Jerusalem. This is the only, but it doesn't even matter.
Widespread from when?
there's no evidence of a eye of a needle in the wall that was destroyed in 70 AD. That's what they're trying to claim. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, widespread from when? In Arabic.
Check the source.
Just asking you.
It's pretty extensive on the history, JJ. You could either look at it or not. Okay.
On your travel channel?
My understanding of what I learned, it seemed like James knew a little bit.
Comes from the channel.
You're saying that you investigated a few days ago, whatever. Well, I mean, that's my understanding, so I did a little investigation myself. I actually have some photos. You seem to want to reject it. Scholarly, whatever. Then I looked up the
I'm not
scholarly
clicking on your
opinion on
travel
it.
site.
All they're saying, JJ, all they're saying is there's no evidence, none of eye of the needle.
The
They're not
website
saying
is
there's no evidence
literally
of eye of the
called.
needle and the camel and all that. They're claiming there's no evidence of such a wall in Jerusalem. That's what they're with respect to the temple of which was destroyed. That's all they're trying to say, JJ.
What's a travel site?
I can give you guys more sites, but that travel
Did you click
site,
that, Daniel?
in my opinion, this did a really
Yeah,
good job.
I'm looking at the video now.
That's actually a good channel.
Yeah, it looks really good. I want to watch this.
But that's about as far as I go with the Bible, with atheists.
Travel channel. Travel tip website. Is it Geocities? Am I going to get bombarded with GoDaddy ads or some shit? Doofuses.
The website looks horrible. I wouldn't be surprised if there was like
Did not.
MIDI playing.
Yeah. And a little animated applet. Some dancing Bedouins.
At the bottom, they show an actual photo, an older photo of one in Nazareth, right? And like I said, the reports are, the only thing is that these gates exist.
There's a slim hole in the wall. This must be the place. Ta-da!
No. Not that this must be the place. The assumption is that the gate Jesus was talking about was in Jerusalem, right? All the scholars are saying, or all the naysayers are saying, is that there's no evidence of such a wall, for a wall that was already destroyed in 70 AD. That's what they're saying. But if you really look at what it says, that these walls did exist, there's evidence of walls all over the place. They're called the Needle. They deal with camels. And all you're saying, JJ, is there's no evidence of a wall in Jerusalem. That's what you're citing.
It's funny. So there's another interpretation of it too, that it doesn't even say camel. That's a.
You're talking about like rope or something?
Yeah, there's the rope translation. That it's saying that it's more possible to stick this thick rope through a tiny little hole in a needle. But I don't think that one's true either. It's a good theory, but I don't think it's true. All irrelevant, because there are other places in the Bible where it says that all things are possible. If it's just saying that all possible things are possible, I don't see what the point is.
Well, JJ, what did you not think that was reasonable? What I was saying, like it's not so for things that are impossible for man, those things could be possible as long as they're not contradictions. If we're going with the framework that God doesn't do contradictions, so that.
But there are other places where it says that all things are possible for he who believes.
Right.
So that's not talking about God. It's talking about man.
No, that's what I mean.
So it's saying, is that just saying that all things that are possible for someone who believes?
Right. So a man may not be able to raise somebody from the dead, or heal the sick, or do something like that on his own power. But with God's power, it is possible. So that does make
If you believe.
impossible things. That could make impossible things for man possible, but not. That doesn't necessarily have to mean. But I understand, obviously, on face value, or just reading it straight. Yeah, it would include everything. But obviously, again, it would just come back to, like, could you read something like that and just say, well, could you read a statement like that? And when, because we're talking about valid and invalid interpretations, I think it just means ones that you could say, well, okay, that's plausible. That's what that means. That's a valid one, maybe. An invalid one would be like, no, there's no way that could be true. So I think when James was saying what you're saying there is an invalid interpretation, he's just saying there's not any possibility of it being even, you can't make that work. He shouldn't say that.
I call it the Sith fallacy, Andrew. It's where to derive some kind of fictional contract, the interlocutor has to try to walk a word to absurdity, or to its maximum potential usage, and in doing so, they're invalidating their own argument, and it's poor reasoning skills. So this happens all the time, but only the Sith talk in absolutes, which is why I call it the Sith fallacy.
Did you say the Sith?
Yeah, nice Star Wars reference, bro.
Sith.
Nice.
Christians talk in absolutes all the time.
So when he's walking with the young Skywalker, he says only the Sith deal in absolutes.
Yeah, it's a dumb line, actually.
Yeah,
and Christians talk about absolutes all the time.
No, it's a great line.
Apparently God does too, because according to John's view of glory, you either have it or you don't. There is no in between.
James, are you saying there's no? I didn't hear what you. Are you saying there's no? Are you saying there is absolutes or there's not absolutes? I didn't hear what you said.
So absolutes do exist. Like, I believe that there is an absolute truth. I don't believe that, like, all truth is equal. I believe that those are statements you can make. But if I say,
what?
If I say I'm going to the store, somebody could be a complete idiot and say, he said he's going to the store, like all stores. See, look, he's driving a contradiction. James just said he's going to go to all the stores. It's one of those things that, like, you have to take statements and their context.
Sounds like you're.
James said he's going to go to all the stores?
Or it's like if I say, if I'm at a basketball hoop and I say I made all the baskets. Now, I'm typically saying that I'm making all the baskets that I myself shot. I'm not directly saying that no one else made a basket, but if you walk that to an absolute, you could say that I am, and that's where absurdities come in.
Bro, what are these fucking analogies, bro?
What?
So, for example, if we're talking about a basketball game, a pickup game, and I said, yeah, I made all the baskets. Now, I'm just meaning in that sense what I shot. Now, if you say, I'm going to walk this to absurdity, he's saying that he made every single basket, no one else made any basket. That's not how.
It's just double meaning.
Yeah, it's just, and that's what I'm trying to imply in the sense that if you take what they're doing and you're not charitable, and you put it to absurdity, you can derive any fictional contradiction you want.
I don't know where you're going with this double meaning thing.
Well, it's also kind of like saying all doesn't necessarily mean all. It means all within whatever the
like Bruce Lee saying, like Bruce Lee saying, I've defeated all opponents, right? Like,
right, yeah, right, or like saying, yeah, because it applies to the scripture that we're talking about as far as saying, all things are possible, or maybe even possible. It could be a word that, you have to look into the range of that. John was talking about the semantic range of impossible, or these different words, that could have a lot to do with it too. So that's just kind of all that together is how we kind of distill out what would be valid interpretations. But but yeah, so that kind of makes sense. Or if you just said, all you do is put me down. Well, obviously, if you tell somebody that, you don't mean all they do is put you down. They breathe, they eat, they do all kinds of things. So it's just figures of speech and so just getting down to the actual meaning. And I think that is
how we're to understand the Bible.
well, I mean, I think there's some of that involved, right? I mean, I think Calvinists talk about it a lot when because they want to get around the the idea that God. I didn't mean that maliciously. I'm just saying the way they work around it. I'm not a Calvinist, but to be fair, I don't want to disparage them. But I'm just saying the way they get around things like all in Scripture saying certain things. They'll say it doesn't mean all, and in fact, it's true. When the word all is used in the Bible, it doesn't always mean all, like everyone without exception. So I think it just kind of tough. I mean, I think that's where you kind of have to break down the words in the sentence because we're reading the English translation, and so it's just it's a little difficult to just take that at face value and just say, well, that's what it means.
What's the specific verse you're referring to with this all thing?
I think it's in Matthew. I'm not sure.
There's a few places.
Yeah, it's probably repeated. I don't know. Maybe JJ, do you know?
In a nutshell, he's going to a crowd and he's saying, with God, all things are possible. Now, he's recognizing to them that they have limitations as humans and there's certain things they can't do. But he's not saying, with God, all logical impossibilities are possible. He's just simply distinguishing us from them.
Well, I don't know. That seems pretty obvious, like the meaning of that statement. Is anyone disagreeing?
JJ has been arguing the opposite the whole entire evening.
Is that true, JJ?
What's that?
That verse they're talking about where he says, with God, all things are possible. Are you inferring that to mean, like, with God, like, every single state of affair can be actualized or some shit?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
That includes, like, logical contradictions?
I don't know why it would be discluded.
Okay.
Yeah, but you seem to get us 15, so I think that's a good wrap on that.
Well, that's just how I, like, interpret it. Like, when, like, someone says God can do anything, it's like God can bring about any logically possible states of affairs. Like, you just, like, interpret it like that.
Why do you
that's
interpret
how I
it that way?
interpret it.
Why, though? Why do you interpret it that way?
Because I don't think it's, like, a view that's viable to think that God can bring about logical contradictions.
Why?
I'm just steel manning, like, their position here, right? Like, I'm not going to strong
I'm just asking you why.
Because they think that the laws of logic are reflective of God's eternal nature or mind or something like that, right?
Do you think that's what was being thought about when the scripture was written?
Can you rephrase that question? I don't know what you're asking.
Well, I understand the modern interpretation,
Mm-hmm.
but do you think that that's what was meant when it was written?
No, I have no idea. How would I know that? I mean, even Christians have a hard time on the interpretation argument. Yeah, I wouldn't know that.
That's where this all started.
Yeah,
we're talking about interpretation.
JJ has
and what's a valid interpretation or an invalid interpretation?
Yeah, JJ has no one who he can cite who's ever took it to mean that. And we were even talking about, I even granted him like the first 150 years of Christianity of a substantial group of Christians even debating that or that being an issue. And so I'm saying that he's arriving something based on 2,000 years later and how he feels looking at the text, but that's not valid. I wouldn't even take that seriously.
Yeah, but like no amounts of citation are gonna like give like a deductive justification as to like what someone meant when they were uttering these words or like writing them down on paper. So like I don't see what's there to like what is there to argue here, right? Just have like two different interpretations of a statement.
We have scientific papers. Are you saying the same thing for them?
Wait, you have scientific papers that someone had some like intentional state when I'm writing something? Like
Because
what?
because how do we know that that's what the scientist really meant when he wrote that paper? Because it sounds like the way you're doing it is that if you're not taking into account how people around him interpreted the words and characterized that, then you're saying that any writing, even though people have told you this is what it means, this is how we're interpreting it, is just vacuous.
Wait, what are these scientific papers that like have some sort of justification for your proposition that people meant a certain thing?
Well,
I
He's
don't
just
know.
talking about he's trying to say any scientific paper. How do you know they meant what you think they meant?
Because they can express
That's
what
what
they
he's
meant.
saying. Oh, that's interesting.
and you assume that the authors or the people who carried this tradition can't express what they meant? It just sounds like confirmation bias.
No, they're writing down the statements, and then what they meant by those statements are inferred by, I guess you could say, scholars or some shit like that.
It's also inferred by the church and how they've been conveyed. And
Yeah,
so
the church, which is what I meant when I said scholars.
and the way when we look at
So there's a difference.
well, the way when we do hermeneutics and we see whether or not something could be a valid position, because there are things that you could ask for in Christianity where there's two positions, and potentially church fathers have held both, and that would.
This is the thing, though, James. Like, listen, I'll tell you why. Like, hermeneutics is like completely besides the point, right? When you're like making an analogy to like scientific papers nowadays, the people can tell us what they meant, right? So there's no room for interpretation when someone can just tell you what they meant by a certain statement.
Paper that you have, the person's still alive who can tell you what they meant.
They could have told other people. Like, I don't understand. There are some things that are just not up for interpretation. Like the word "all" is definitely up for interpretation. If you're like saying it's something that it's not, right? There's a clear distinction.
What do you think the person who wrote this told? Do you think they just wrote it and then they just didn't give any thoughts on it, and 2,000 years later
I think they wrote it and died.
On it?
No, I think they wrote it and died, and then there's a branch of hermeneutics that deals with that. What they meant when they said that.
You don't believe that they conveyed what they meant to anyone? That they just wrote
When you say conveyed what they meant, all you're saying is that they wrote down what they wanted to write in a Bible, right? And then there's hermeneutics that deals with interpreting what they meant by those statements. We're saying scientific papers, there's like actual accounts of people telling us what they meant.
And
or like modern ones, we can ask them what they meant.
In this particular case, you have two of the Gospels. I believe they're both conveying the same example from Jesus. They're both describing this. You have in Luke, where Luke says, and I have taken into account to give an account of the Gospels, indicating that there's others around, that the information is being shared, that they're explaining to other Christians what parables mean. So I think that it's fallacious reasoning for you to assume that somebody wrote it, that they didn't convey or transfer anything down and then died. Now, you could have a valid point if you have a large body of Christendom in the early of church that is arguing or disputing this meaning, but it's never happened.
Sure. So just give an account of whoever wrote the verse where he says, through God all things are possible. Give an account of that person telling us what he meant, and by that, I mean him telling us that he meant all things that are logically feasible. So give an account of that.
So you go through the church, and we don't take Scripture isolating it, and we have a whole field of Christian study, from theology to philosophy. Very, very minimal Christian groups today are going to take any view that logical impossibilities are possible.
Yeah, in modern church, yeah. And that's not what I asked. You didn't answer the question.
No, I'm explaining to you that like this is a consistent body that God does logical and rational things. You don't have a consistent body of work that indicates that God does irrational, or that there's no reason or justification.
That's not what I asked you.
That's why I'm trying to explain to you why your question in and of itself is bad.
Wait, what was my question?
You were asking, so you were special pleading then in order for me to
What was the
have
question? Not what I was doing.
explaining the question, I'm also telling you what you're doing. Your question is saying, what did this particular author, did he write something else that clarifies what he wrote? That's special pleading. You're saying that unless you have that individual write down something else that's clarifying, then how do you know that's what he meant? But then the thing is, you can even take that at one step further. If you did have that, the way you guys are arguing absurdity, how do you know?
Wait, where's the special pleading? Hold up, where's the special pleading?
The special pleading is because I do not see where you've built into the premises where it's obligatory that individual.
No, I never asserted that it's obligatory. Listen, just listen to what I'm saying closely, and then answer, right? So you said that. Basically, I said that scientific papers, we can just ask the people what they meant, and if not, they've expressed it, and then we can have accounts of that through colleagues writing, just information being passed down like that. And then you said that it's fallacious for me to assume that the writers of the Gospels didn't clarify what they mean or didn't express what they meant with their statements when they uttered them, right? So I'm asking you, if that's the case, can you give an account of the writer clarifying what he meant when he said the word all?
And that's where it gets fallacious. Because you've just built that from your own vantage point, that what the scientist told his friends before he died, the friends can convey it. The scientist didn't necessarily have to write it. So in this question, you're then asking me to give you a specific that this person had to write it, or somehow my point doesn't hold. I'm saying that you're being fallacious. You're holding a double standard when you're asking me the question, which is special pleading.
I'm just shocked. You still haven't answered my question, and neither do you understand it.
Special pleading.
What am I special pleading? I don't understand. I'm not saying you're obligated to give an account of this, right? I'm just saying that. Listen, I'm just saying that.
You said the scientist could tell his friend, and we could ask his friend. But then when you are asking, but then when you are we're assuming he could possibly have died. Not all scientists who have wrote every scientific paper still are alive today. What I'm saying is that the argument that you're presenting is you are special pleading for your case, saying that, hey, I'm allowed to have somebody who talked to the scientist saying, hey, this is what I gathered, and that person writes that down for you. But yet we have two different accounts of this event in the Gospels, and we have all of Christendom.
Okay, perfect. You said there's an account. Provide the account. That's what I've been asking this whole time. Give an account of the Gospel writer clarifying to one of his colleagues, or just clarifying it himself, what he meant by the word all when he uttered it.
Because you're
so give the account. Hey, listen, if you don't have the account, just say you don't have it. Go back and research, and then come back.
Because you're
or what he meant by impossible.
No, I'm like I said, I'm done because he's not being sincere.
Okay, listen, that's a good code.
He's not holding to himself, so it's done. If you can't be sincere in the conversation, then I don't want to continue.
James,
that's perfectly fine. I mean, you probably have low tolerance since you haven't answered my question for 4 minutes in a row. I've been patient with you.
In sincerity.
James, where did he? I am curious. I'm honestly asking, man. What did he say that was insincere?
Okay, so within this, we're comparing about the scientific papers. I even pointed out, what if the scientist died, because he said you could go ask the scientist. So then, if the scientist didn't write a paper clarifying it, he mentioned, well, you could go ask the scientist's friends, or maybe those scientists wrote a paper. So what I'm conveying is that you have the author's writings. You don't need anything written from that author in particular to clarify or to address anything further on that. If you have people who were around the author who carried that information by his own standard, for him to insist that I have to have direct writing from the author is a double standard.
Not what I said. Relax.
What you said.
This is why I'm telling you, I'm urging you. Listen carefully to what I'm saying, then respond, right? So you're saying that I'm saying that the author has to directly express himself, right, through some sort of writing that we can track. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you have an account of the author clarifying what he meant by the word all, or just anything in general, right, and he said that to a colleague or someone who was there when he was writing the Gospels, and you have an account of that, a historical account of that, then provide the account. So here, I'll ask the question one more time. If you have an account of an author of the Gospel, whoever wrote the verse, I don't know who wrote it exactly, but a verse where he says all things are possible through God, right? If you have an account of one of his friends, someone who's there when he was writing it, or himself expressing what he meant by the statement, right, then give the account. If not, then just say you're not going to answer the question, go do some research and come back.
No, I'm saying that you're being uncharitable.
Okay, you're dodging.
The conversation, and the main synopsis is that we look. It's basically you're deriving a contradiction that nobody ever thought of. No one in that first century.
Nobody?
Thought, hold on. No one in that first century ever thought.
Nobody that you know of, you mean?
No one that is look within Christendom as we're conveying it, and
Nobody that you know of.
JJ, let me finish.
You're dodging.
You're going. No. Look, you are saying.
This is just a classic John Lee argument from ignorance.
No, I'm saying that you have an argument from ignorance, JJ. I'm saying that from your view, that you have pulled directly from your butt tonight, you don't have any basis.
Hey, don't be so vulgar.
You're basically saying that because somebody never thought of like some weird, funky objection that was not valid, that all of a sudden that makes that weird, funky objection valid. And I'm saying that's stupid. I think I'm pretty clear on that. Like, ridiculous.
So what? What's the argument from ignorance?
JJ, you're implying that you came up, JJ, 2,000 years later, maybe some other people within the past 500 years, have came up with this interpretation to try to superimpose it on the text. It would be like me going back to Charles
I'm just
Darwin.
reading the text plainly.
I'm
just reading the plain text.
Superimposing his interpretation.
It would be like
providing his interpretation.
It would be like me going. It would be like me going back to Origin of Species with Charles Darwin and implying that it's all completely about supremacy and superior races.
No, listen, he's not superimposing. No, listen.
He's superimposing.
The difference is Charles Darwin made it clear that that's not what evolution is about. He expressed the meaning of his statements. You've been dodging this whole night.
Look,
and listen, about JJ. He's not listen, about JJ, one sec, you said something false, right? He's not superimposing his interpretation. He's just providing a distinct interpretation from the one that, let's say, scholars of the church hold, right? But you haven't given any account as to why the interpretation that you hold is more valid than JJ's, right? So you just have two equal interpretations.
No, I have given an account. When you're looking at history and you look at Christianity, there is no Christian source, even in our philosophy field, even when you start going and you look at the majority consensus, no one is ever claiming that God can do logically impossible things. No one has ever went back to that verse and implying it in the way JJ does. I've got all of Christendom. He's got JJ 2,000 years later.
An appeal to majority? An appeal to authority?
When you're looking at a field and you're
That's two fallacies.
No, if you're appealing to authority, you can actually do that appropriately. If you have
by appealing to a valid authority, but that still doesn't make what you're saying true.
It's valid authority, which means that there is no problem with that appeal to authority.
What makes the church a valid authority and JJ not? I don't understand.
Because the church is conveying written documents that are passed.
So is JJ.
No, he's not. He has not done that. As a matter of fact,
listen, let's just assume that the church is reliable.
No, we have asked him. No, you claimed that he is.
I'm helping you. Let's just assume that the church is a valid source, right? You can appeal to them as an authority. That still doesn't make what you're saying true. That just means they're a valid source of authority.
The claim is that this is what this could possibly mean. I have everybody that you can even look online. You can't even find any church fathers debating this as a real objection. And he has nothing but something he's imposed on the
This is
text.
fallacious. That's it.
This is like
It's
this is
really
like
transparent that you're just appealing to majority and authority. That's it.
this is like me going and use the origin of species example. It doesn't matter what people around Charles Darwin said. It doesn't matter this, because I feel that those words in a modern context is talking about supremacy means that Charles Darwin was a supremacist. This is what's happening in the conversation. I don't know why you can't see that.
I don't know why you can't see the fact that Charles Darwin has expressed his thoughts on evolution in his books, that it's not about survival of the fittest or whatever, right? Like whatever you're saying, he that your interpretation is, right? Like he's expressed the meaning of his statements. We're saying, has the gospel writers done that? If so, can you give an account of it? And you're just dodging that question like 40 times.
No, I told you that it was fallacious because I'm saying that the people
Yes,
who
you're
the
dodging again.
He's the one that can't give an account, man. JJ's making a claim. He has an interpretation. It's bogus. Nobody buys
Okay, why is it bogus?
He's
What's the
pretending.
justification for that claim?
15
He
years
provided no source.
the atheist on stage.
Wait.
He's just-
Wait, what's the source you
I'm
provide
not
to make
saying
an
it's
interpretation
bogus
valid?
because he provided no source. What I am saying
I
is
hope they
it's
save
bogus
this replay.
and
Hey,
he
stop
provided
over talking
no
each other, guys. Calm down.
Hold on, John, just real quick. I
One
hope
at a
they
time.
save this replay because he came in and said that JJ's interpretation was stupid.
That's not what I
then
said.
when I
That's not what I
indicated that
said. Wait, don't
somebody else
misrepresent me.
takes
Wait.
If this
Don't-
replay stays
hold
out,
up.
go back and
Don't
watch it.
misrepresent me. Hold up. You're lying about what I said. Wait. All I said is that I side with the interpretation of the Christians on this statement. That doesn't mean that my interpretation is any more valid than JJ's. Like, are you dumb?
Are you saying that a flat earther is just as equal interpretation of the data as a round earther?
No, because the data is
No.
Oh my. What?
Right. Look, this is
No,
my
because
point.
they're scientific accounts.
You have
What
Christendom
are you
as
talking about?
what it's been
Daisy,
conveyed.
what's an invalid interpretation?
Yeah, good luck. It's an interpretation that doesn't conform to the majorities or the authorities, right? Right.
Is that it?
Listen, James.
Has
Even
nothing
if
to
we
do
say,
with authorities. It has nothing to do with authorities.
No, James
What's
appeals
your
to
invalid
authority.
opinion?
Wait, hold up. James appeals to
Interpretation.
authority, self-admittedly. I don't understand.
Yeah,
No,
there's
what's an
that
invalid
too.
interpretation?
Well, when you're doing
Wait, JJ, one second. John, what are you saying?
It wasn't until
I'm talking about hermeneutics, okay? James is talking about the church fathers, both of which are valid objections.
No. I'll tell you why it's not a valid objection, right? Because if you're talking about hermeneutics, it's just a specific interpretation of the text that's held commonly throughout, like, church fathers, throughout the church, throughout scholars. Why is that interpretation more valid than JJ's? Why is that interpretation true? Why is JJ's false? You haven't given an account.
That's
Why?
not how hermeneutics goes, but
Yeah,
how
it
does
is a study.
No.
It's literally the
John,
study.
tell me why? How does hermeneutics work?
Yeah, how does
Well,
hermeneutics work
hermeneutics-
in relation to defining a word?
hermeneutics is where you take this.
Don't let them shift to another subject. You got to hold on to the stupid.
James, you did that like 40 times. Relax. We're letting you
That's
off.
fine. We can let John lead off this time.
No, you have your
James,
objection.
tap out,
I
let
have
John
my-
step in,
I
and then
come
he'll
from a
tap
different
out.
angle of objection. In either case, both objections are valid, and JJ's
Yeah, you just
interpretation
stated
is
that,
bogus.
you constructed it, and you didn't like provide proof as to why.
I actually
So,
did.
John, why is your
I had no way.
interpretation
Wait, I
of what
actually
a word
did.
means more valid than JJ's?
It's JJ that failed to make a substantiation for his bogus claim.
Which bogus claim?
No, not a claim. It's an interpretation. You idiot.
Well, it's a claim of my interpretation. That's fine.
No, you're claiming you have an interpretation. It's
Yeah,
different.
right. That's what
If
I'm
it's a
saying.
claim, you're asserting it to be true, but that's just your interpretation of something.
Well, it's true that it's my interpretation.
Yeah. Listen, John.
What's bogus about it? John?
Let's just directly ask him the question. John, do you think God can do all? You can do all things through God. Does that mean logically impossible things, John?
No, it's laughable to think that it does mean.
Okay. Why does it not mean that?
The question is, why does JJ think it is?
Okay, see how we just dodged that? You saw that?
No.
Of course.
See how this, wait a minute
No, you
here.
saw how you just dodged that, right?
Listen. First and
course.
foremost, JJ's the one that came up with the claim, okay? We're scoffing at
Yeah,
it.
and then
We're
you're saying his
rejecting it,
interpretation is
okay?
bogus, but you can only assert that if you prove your
Yeah, it's-
interpretation is
And you're
bogus.
you're merely scoffing. That's all you're doing is scoffing.
The burden is
Just-
not for us, it's for JJ.
No,
okay?
you stated that
once
his
you
interpretation was
once
bogus.
you
Listen, you're
realize
not talking
that-
to JJ, you're talking to me.
Once you realize it's a little child, then you'll realize that you'll be
Okay,
on
old
his
man.
butt, not us.
Hey, I'm happy I'm youthful.
Wrinkly prude.
But that is
Yeah, John,
that is
listen,
the way
John,
it works.
John,
The
other than the
burden
ad
of
homs.
proof-
One sec, James, one sec, let me talk to John.
But the burden of proof is on the
No, I'm already done. I've already had my say. I'm done.
What's the argument to that?
Wait, that's all your stamina on?
Yeah, he's got nothing but scoffing.
The burden
John,
of
drink
Hey,
some coffee
baby.
and come back.
the burden of proof is on the person making the claim.
Okay, anyways, John, you were
That's
talking to me,
JJ.
you're not talking to JJ, right? You asserted that JJ's interpretation is bogus, so I'm asking you to demonstrate that by saying that your interpretation is better, and then telling me why your interpretation is better. So your interpretation is that the word all, doesn't mean logically impossible things, so I'm asking you to prove that. And you just ran away.
I want you guys to remember that every single time you talk to a Christian, and a Christian says God exists, then now you have to prove their claim wrong. That you have to now provide positive demonstration information.
Listen, JJ, we know what he said is stupid,
That's
but let's just
that's
not
common.
engage it.
That's commonplace anyway, James.
Don't even engage it. Don't even engage it.
It doesn't matter. It happens all the time.
No, that's utterly unrelated. Don't even engage it. I don't even know why he said that.
It's completely related because the person making the claim has the burden. We asked JJ, how did you arrive at that? He says feelings. That's not valid.
I never said that actually.
You said it seems to you.
Yo, John, John.
That's not what I said either.
John, do you consider little child an insult?
I consider it a fact.
But is it also an insult? Like, if you call someone an idiot, you consider it a fact. I don't know. It was just a bit weird of you, John. But yeah, go on. I thought you said you tapped out. Why are you still talking? Okay, I guess you did tap out. Anyways, it's John's burden to prove that his interpretation is more correct than JJ's. Otherwise, it's just equal interpretation.
Yep, feelings versus history. History wins.
History based on feelings.
I claim feelings versus hermeneutics, James. It's a different.
Hermeneutics are interpretations
often-
of scripture, which are feelings.
Yeah, I often appeal to feelings. I think feelings are very powerful, and
keeps
but I actually didn't appeal to that here.
Yeah, I love how John just keeps saying the word hermeneutics like it's going to help his case, but he's not giving like a hermeneutical account as to why his interpretation is better than JJ's.
Interpretation.
Yeah, hermeneutics, but I won't give a hermeneutical account of why my interpretation is better.
Here's the thing.
John, what's
That's
your
just
John?
ridiculous.
What's your argument that JJ's interpretation is worse? You got none? Guess not. James, do you have an argument as to why JJ's interpretation is worse? What's the argument?
I've already laid this out, but I'm still surprised because if the way you guys are arguing this tonight, if I come in tomorrow and say God exists because, you now have to say God doesn't exist because you're not arguing from that lacktheism safe space that a lot of atheists like to go to.
Wait, why not? Why not?
I don't know why you're like.
Why not? Why not, James? James, why not?
It's such a terrible argument.
James, why not? Why can't you be a
I know.
lacktheist? James, why can't you be a lacktheist?
You can claim it all you want, but if the way you're laying this out to John is, he makes a claim, you have to make a claim equally as valid to prove his.
Equally is valid.
No, that's not true. That's not true because it's not true at all. Because I could just have no interpretation of the text. And then that would just be lacking any judgment, and then I wouldn't have to prove anything.
I mean, but then that's just, I don't know, and you're done.
Yeah, and you don't know. Yeah, exactly. That's what agnosticism is. Congratulations for learning that. I'm glad I was able to educate you.
Yeah, but most atheists don't use the titles properly anyway, so I don't care about that.
Okay, then you're not speaking to most atheists, like the white belts.
No, most atheists don't know what atheism means, agnostic means. They don't know.
A represents negation. Theism is the belief in God, so negation of theism. Like, what do you want to know?
Yeah, most atheists don't understand that if you make a claim in a conversation, you got to actually put something behind it, which JJ has not done.
Yeah, put some meat on the table.
No. Listen, buddy, I don't know why you appeal to like agnosticism, because you could just have no interpretation of a text, and then you would be agnostic on it.
No, what we have presented in response to his was, this is how this has classically been interpreted. This is how Christianity takes this. Now, how do you derive at your interpretation? And he has not given us anything at all.
Wait, so the grounds for your interpretation...
But I gave you something.
No, it's just like when you guys are saying that you're questioning a theist about God's existence, you're giving objections based on observation or thoughts on the statement that a theist makes. That's what we've been doing with JJ. JJ has the burden of proof. JJ hasn't delivered anything.
What's my burden of proof?
The one making the claim has the burden of proof.
What is my burden of proof?
Sorry, this is going nowhere. James is...
No. James, what is my burden of proof?
Your burden of proof is to demonstrate that that verse means what you said it means.
It's my interpretation.
I mean, if you don't believe you have any justification, then fine.
James, you're not.
It's a plain reading. It's a plain reading of the text.
James, you're not ready for this conversation. I'm not gonna lie.
15, your sarcasm and mockery aside.
I'm not being sarcastic. I don't think you have like the.
You came in and you thought that linguistically speaking, that anybody who would say that it was ridiculous.
That's not what I said. That's not what I said.
When I told you that JJ
listen, that's not what I said. Just don't lie about what I said. Don't lie about what I said. Wait, let me correct you.
That's what happened.
Okay, listen.
You started to white knight the atheist when you found out that an atheist actually made it.
Okay, first of all, I'm not an atheist, nor am I an agnostic.
Nor am I an atheist.
Second of all, I didn't state that JJ was ridiculous for having that interpretation. All I stated is that that's not my interpretation, right? And my grounds for that was because that's how it's classically been interpreted, but that doesn't mean my interpretation is more true than JJ's, just because it's been classically interpreted like that. So you can stop strawmanning me with this, and I'm not being sarcastic. I honestly just don't think you're ready for this conversation.
No, I honestly think that you came in, you saw my point.
But this is the fifth time you strawman me.
No, that's what happened. That's my perception. If the replay stays up...
Yeah, I agree with your interpretation of that text, yes.
I will see if that minute when you came in, you're coming in and you're saying...
Yeah, I agree with your interpretation of the statement. That doesn't mean I think my interpretation is more true.
Then why don't you ask JJ to back it up, John?
I just did. It's a plain reading of the text.
Listen, I think JJ's justification...
In fact, it's more than that.
Listen, I think JJ's justification...
There's an exegetical reason for it.
You don't want to get into that rabbit trail.
But there is. I'm just saying that he says I've given nothing, but that's not true either.
John, I believe I have...
There are many verses that talk about this.
One second, John,
not to mention that there actually is there is discussion about what is logically possible for God to do, going back hundreds of years, back to at least the 4th century, if not longer.
Wait. John asked me a question. One sec, James. John asked me a question. Let me just answer. John, you're asking me...
I'm trying to address JJ.
Clearly
Let me just answer.
In antiquity.
It'll take 10 seconds, right? John asked me to ask JJ to prove his interpretation. John, I believe I have an equal interpretation with JJ, right? I don't share his interpretation of the text. That doesn't mean I think my interpretation is more valid on the basis that more people hold that interpretation. right? I think JJ's interpretation is actually justified. Like the justification he gave for it is not like invalid or anything, right? He's just saying the word all just means what it's classically meant, etymologically meant, right? So yeah, there you go, old man.
And that's the problem.
That's the problem here.
The problem is if you're saying
Honesty.
if you're saying that it's valid, that it's just as credible a plain reading
Look,
of the
I didn't
text.
say it's valid, bro.
reading-
Listen to me carefully. Listen to me. I said his justification is valid. Okay, buddy.
Well, however you want to word it, that means if John
No.
goes Origin of Species tonight, and he says, "Hey, this is racist. This is supremacist talk 101." You now have to concede that his is just as credible as JJ.
Facts.
I would
What type
concede
of
that.
coffee do you drink, James?
I would actually concede that it's possible. Maybe that is what it's about.
Yeah, this is.
I don't think so, but maybe.
Yeah, this is pointless. They don't understand equal interpretation. It's no problem.
I'm drinking delicious Ethiopia that I made a lovely pour over.
Yeah, just
little
some
half and half.
cherries.
JJ conceded to the point. You made a lot
James,
of
what
bad.
type of coffee do you drink? Like black?
No, typically I drink a little bit of sugar in it.
He put
What
sugar
about you,
because he's a
John?
degenerate.
What about you, John? Johnny?
He doesn't drink coffee.
He just drinks energy drinks every single day so he can like last
Do you?
2 hours on Clubhouse.
Do you drink coffee?
Yeah, I drink a black iced coffee every morning. I like need it to go to the gym.
Iced coffee? What kind of iced coffee?
No, it's like iced coffee, but it's black. It like tastes way better than the hot version. So yeah.
That's actually what
Is
I
it,
drink, believe it or not.
Is it a cold press?
No, it's like a regular iced coffee, but they take out the sugar and the cream, so it's black.
They take out the sugar in the.
Yeah, they don't put it in.
Now you're irritating me. They don't take it out then. They just don't put it in. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Is it a cold process though? Is it cold brew? Yeah, it's a cold press coffee. Yeah, I love that.
It tastes way better than the hot black iced coffee. Black coffee.
Yeah, cold process has a much different taste and it's delicious. It takes a lot more coffee.
And you also don't have to wait like 10 minutes for it to cool down. So.
Oh yeah. I haven't had any all summer though. I was going to make some, but
Yeah, John, what were you saying?
because I make my own coffee.
I said I drink the same thing.
Oh, see, we could bond. The old man and the child.
Do you make it or you get it from a shop?
I get it from Tim Hortons, and actually, I had an interview for Tim Hortons shop this morning, so I'll be getting it for free from now on.
Oh well, good luck with that if that's what you want.
Tim Hortons, the best
but
cup of coffee.
Tim Hortons making cold press. That's news to me. Are you sure they're not hot brewing it and then just refrigerating it?
No. I live in Canada.
Oh, well, good.
Tim Hortons are way better.
Good for them. Well, I'm in Minnesota, and we do have it. We at least had a Tim Hortons locally. I don't know if it's still there because it's garbage, in my opinion. But that's not to say that your true Canadian Tim Hortons are not.
You're factually wrong about Tim Hortons. Tim Hortons is the best place to get coffee.
Well, I'm not wrong about the local one here that I went to.
Well, actually, that's your interpretation.
Yeah, I'm not wrong about my interpretation.
Yeah.
You've been really stubborn tonight, JJ.
And I'm just rolling in the W's, so.
Do you want me to tell you what he said, Aizen? He said that the mind. He said that the mind of a human being and the mind of a bee is similar in the sense that the knowledge that bees have, he claims that bees have knowledge first and foremost, justified true belief, that these propositions are language-based, that they are justified by reason, right, and that they are capable, bees are capable of being aware of what's right and wrong. Well, what do you think about all these statements?
I actually didn't talk about a sense of right and wrong with bees, but I'm not. I'm not against it. No, I never did. I never talked about the sense of right and wrong with bees. I talked about a sense of right and wrong with lions and cats and dogs and gorillas and by extension apes even. But I never talked about a sense of morality or a sense of right and wrong with bees. But
At the
again,
very end, you did,
I'm not,
but
no, I didn't. But I'm not opposed to it. I just never mentioned it.
I'm just saying, what do you think about that, Abe?
John, what am I, like your philosophy processor?
I just want your opinion on JJ's views. He's coming out with some.
Well, I'm just an ignorant.
Speak-
I'm just an
speak-
ignorant high schooler.
Speak
My opinion doesn't
freely,
matter.
freely and frankly.
Listen, I think I think it's possible for you to think that bees can have justified true beliefs. Sure, like thinking that pollen is like nutritious, which is why they're attracted to it, and pollen is nutritious, and they've like ate pollen or whatever before, and it's proved to be nutritious, so it's justified, and it's also true.
Justified by reason.
There's better-
right? By
There's
reason.
better examples. There's better examples,
Justified
right?
by like induction.
But so the alternative to that is you might want to say something like
Induction is not reason.
they only do it because it's instinctual or something like that, right? But then it calls into question what's the difference between something that's instinctual and something that's what you might want to call reason.
It's probably the exact same difference between induction and deduction, which is why I said it's through induction that they believe the pollen is good for them, right? Because they've had it so many times and it's like proved to give good effects, good side effects, so they do it again and again, believing that it's good, right? I think John's talking about like some sort of argument that pollen is good or some shit.
Well, no, we didn't really talk about that. Actually, what was mentioned about bees, because this is where John Lee had to go, because originally it was apes, comparing apes' minds and human minds, but then he wanted to specify, because humans are apes, we'll just say gorillas. He never really did, well, maybe he did touch on the chimps. The chimps were talked about for a minute. But gorillas and humans, and then he wanted to contrast the minds of lions and their morality, their sense of morality with humans, as morality pertains to having a mind. And then we talked about knowledge, which was going to involve recollection or memory with bees, and whether or not bees possess knowledge. Now, through observation of behavior of bees, we see them not go to the same flower twice to pick up the pollen, because they seem to have knowledge of being at this flower already, thus not going back to it. Now, maybe you just want to call it a true belief that they've been there already and want to do away with justification. Maybe then you don't want to call it knowledge, but I don't care if you call it knowledge. Personally, my position is
pollen there?
that a belief in knowledge is really not well defined. There's not much of a distinction between a belief and knowledge. But that's what was said about bees as it pertains to having a mind or consciousness or something to that effect, as it relates or as it compares to a human. And there was all that was the only pushback was that's absurd. When asked what he meant by absurd, he says, "Well, I just think it's absurd." When asked why he thought it was absurd, he just refused to say. So, get fucked, John Lee.
Well, I'm glad to see that you still stand by your nonsense.
What's nonsense? That's what I thought, bitch. Go sit in the corner. Hazy, what about cats? You think cats have beliefs?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Depends on what you mean by belief. But like, if it's just like a positive attitude towards a proposition, then probably.
Yeah, just holding a proposition to be true.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, it seems pretty straightforward, right? And how do we infer this? We infer this by their behavior. You could talk about dogs if you want. And if you want to talk about a sense of right and wrong, observing the behavior of dogs at least. Sometimes cats, although cats seem to be some kind of sociopaths, maybe.
Like let's say a cat has the belief that fire will physically harm him. And then like in the past he's been burned by fire and it physically harmed him.
Right.
And that's a true belief because fire will harm him. It's justified because he's been harmed before. And it's a belief because he believes it'll harm him. Like I don't understand. He has knowledge.
No, I think it's very straightforward, right? Unless you want to try to say that, no, it's not a belief, it's just an instinct. But again, what's the difference then?
My cats also understand right and wrong and fairness. They get two different types of food. One can of food has a little more food than the other one. My older cat will eat most of her food and then leave. The younger cat will try to eat the rest of her food, and if I catch him doing it, before I don't even have to say anything, and he'll run away because he knows he's doing something wrong.
There you go.
The other one is usually disappointed, and I have to give her more food because she's upset that he ate the rest of her food. It happens every fucking morning. So
I think by wrong here, you're kind of saying that your cat knows that it's something that you don't like it to do.
Well, right, because there's really no other standard.
Right.
Yeah, so he only knows what I've taught him. I mean, other than, like, what he has instinctually.
Instinctually. Yeah, and again, I think that's all you have, too. Or me, for that matter.
Oh, yeah, I would agree, yeah.
What's the difference between instinct and intention?
When you say reason, JJ, you're talking about the axioms of logic, right?
No, I'm talking about processing.
Do you agree with Brenda when she says that bees don't have propositional attitudes because it requires language?
No, and so what?
Well, do you agree?
What she's referring to? No, I don't agree. But what she's referring to is, I think, what would be called language of thought, and I disagree there too. Though Jack doesn't think that a lot of creatures have language of thought. I think they do have something that you'd call language of thought. It might not be as complex as our language of thought or language in general, but I think it's the same thing. What we call language of thought is something that's possessed by any mechanistic creature like that.
Now, when you say a bee has justified true belief, right? What theory of justification in epistemology do you think the bee is holding to?
Oh, I haven't thought about it. I'd have to think about it. I probably won't do that right now. But that's worth considering, John Lee. I don't think it's really that relevant, but for you, because it's kind of interesting. Not that I expect you to understand anything that's said to you about it, but I'm going to keep that in mind. That's a good contribution.
All right, fair enough.
At least you've inspired me to think about it.
What's the problem with animals having these ideas, John? Like, what's the issue with that?
Jeebus.
To be honest, I don't have a problem with a person thinking a human mind and the mind of a bee, or is even the word knowledge is analogous, right? The issue is
not analogous.
What are you even rambling?
Univocal. Yes, but I said what I don't even mind, right?
Why would it be a problem if my cat can reason.
I was just answering, right? And so the issues come when I don't have a problem looking at it in terms of the mind of God as well. And so, being that I don't have a human mind in God's mind and a human mind in a bee's mind, when an atheist has a problem with the questions regarding the mind of God, but then when it comes to the mind of other animals and so forth, they have no such problem, and it seems like they're equivocating. Then it's a double standard, and it's somewhat of a hypocrisy that they have issues with it.
Nobody's invoking any analogies, though, John.
I'm not saying you did, but everyone else did, whether you realize it or not. They did. Yes, they said the knowledge of a bee is not. They said the knowledge of a bee is not the same as the knowledge of a human. You may not have said that, JJ.
Who said that? Who said that?
Altoid, for one.
No, he didn't.
He did.
What was the analogy he gave?
No, he just simply said that. He just simply stated that. Now the other person, I'm trying to remember who else.
He simply stated what?
That you can only talk about it analogously, quote unquote.
No, he never said that. He said when he talked about you can only talk about it analogously, he was talking about you and your problem with only being able to talk about God analogously. It's the only time you mention analogous. He was contrasting you having a problem with there not being a problem with this univocal idea of mind or knowledge with respect to humans and other creatures.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. What you don't understand is he walked it back. This is how we began with way early in the conversation. He was talking about not even gorillas, it was apes. And that's when he mentioned it first.
Mentioned what?
About understanding it analogously. The mind.
Understanding what analogously?
The mind.
Of
a human being to, at the time, it was ape.
Well, if he did, I don't remember. I didn't hear that. I don't think he did. I doubt it, but maybe he did.
About half an hour to 45 minutes later,
I challenge you to find it.
He changed his tune to say, and in fact, you're the one that said that about Altoid, and he just nodded his head in agreement. That's what.
I challenge you to find it.
It'll be in the replay.
Yeah, maybe we should.
Yeah, I challenge you to find it in the replay.
Yeah, this room seems to be going on a long time.
Yeah, I don't know where the time went.
Yeah, should I end it and start a new one?
Yeah, probably. Probably should.
See you on the replays. Is anyone still awake? Obviously, John is.
Yeah, a few of us. I shouldn't be, but here I am.
This is Scorpion.
I think there's a lot of people awake still.
So I went to sleep maybe 6 or 7 hours ago, maybe, and I woke up and John Lee's still fighting. It's amazing. I've got to give you kudos for your energy, John. All right, we're going to
I've still got a lot to go.
Oh, jeez.
Tenacity.
Last man standing.
What the fuck is Sean gonna do after that, you know? Alright, yeah, I'll see you around later, Detroit.